All right, I think we will go ahead and get started just so we don't get behind on time. So tonight is the 7th workshop. So we have basically one more content-filled workshop after this, and then the next workshop, the 9th workshop, will be more of a prep for the upcoming round. So we'll go more into detail about what we expect in your round 1 video, what round 2 is going to be like, and then give you more detail as well on the semifinal submission and what we expect out of the final pitch. So tonight we'll be talking about the go-to-market strategy, which is how you're going to reach your customers. So first we'll do a little check-in like we've been doing, go over any questions that you have from previous workshops. Then we're also going to discuss our judging criteria, and this will be the criteria specific to the semifinal submissions. Round 1 and round 2 don't necessarily have any criteria because they're not meant to be elimination rounds. So everything will be focused on the criteria for semifinal round. And then we'll have kind of a short lecture about how to reach customers and your go-to-market strategy. So as we've been doing, you should come to expect this by now. I'm going to launch the poll to let me know how many customer interviews you've done at this point. And also, after you've done that, feel free to unmute and let us know anything that's come up in your customer discovery interviews, any pivots that you've made, or maybe one that you're considering based on some insights that you've gotten, or if you just want to ask kind of for general feedback about what you're working on, this is a good time to do that. You can type in the chat or just unmute yourself. So it looks like people are getting their customer interviews done. Seems like a higher number than a couple weeks ago, so it looks like a lot of you have been busy. Right, does anybody want to share anything? Forget what your team name is, but the parking app. Did you have any luck after we talked in our office hours of getting anybody to talk to you?
I did actually. I talked to a couple single family houses that do this kind of big, like they'll sell like 80 spots or something. But it turned out for them it really doesn't work because they describe it as playing Tetris in their yard, so they don't know where they're gonna park people when people come. And so they feel like regardless of if people book, like they have to be out there to position people. So there's just not enough value, I think, it brought for them for it to work for them.
Right, so the
So
problem they're having isn't necessarily what you're solving. They're having a just like, how are we fitting cars in? It's not about how are we promoting that we have the spot available.
yeah, I mean their problem is that they don't like being out there. They don't see a way, like the app wouldn't solve that problem because the interesting they told me is there's this one company that asked to just rent their whole front yard and they wanted to put tailgates out there. Like I don't know if they're selling them, if it was for clients, but he thought that would be if I could just someone pay me one lump sum and do whatever you want. But the idea of the booking, because he felt like, oh, I still have to do the work. So for
So they
those,
would want somebody like out there the day of the game, like directing traffic and telling people where to park,
yeah,
actually
basically,
managing it when it's happening.
exactly. He's like, he feels like he has to do that regardless if the app is there or not. And so that's why for him, it felt like not a good fit. Yeah. So still trying to talk to other people and see if this is a common thing or if there's a bit more variability.
Right. Like the tailgate thing is interesting. Like if you could find, people on the other side of that, of, like they're looking for a spot to go and tailgate that they don't have, and then you can match it up with a problem that your sellers are having of using that space. That could be interesting.
Yeah.
Well, at least you're getting interviews. You're getting insights from it, so that's good.
Yeah, it was helpful he gave me a lot of like he told me everything, which was really really nice.
Awesome. All right. So
So,
in the
Emily,
poll. Yeah.
since we've switched our model from the Genuine hair
Hmm.
care company to the Connect and Stay, where alumni gets an opportunity to host a student for to stay in their home for co-op purposes or um, internships. We've talked to a lot of alumni, a lot of mentors that we've had, and we haven't. We're going to send out a formal form to get a written some written reviews, but as of now, from the conversations we've had and just verbal interviews, every alumni has said that they would love to host a student in their house, and we've even came up with a way, and they even helped us brainstorm a way to get revenue in a convenient way.
That's awesome. How did you get connected with all the alumni? Just through the school?
Well, my mentor, I have a mentor who's a lawyer, and he went to West Virginia. And he said, I talked to him, and he thought it was a great idea because he said he had a lot of friends who would, their kids are all grown up and they have empty rooms, and they would love to help students out in that way. So he's sending us a list of all of his connects to send out a mass email to, and then I also have at IUPUI a director of the Bowen Scholarship Program. He's going to help me coordinate with some of the alumni there and get us some stuff. And she has hers. People doing
Nice.
the same.
That's awesome. Do you want to tell Arnold, because I didn't tell him after our office hours how y'all switched to like a totally different idea, but I think it's a cool idea and it's a nice switch that happened because, Oshi recognized this kind of bigger problem that was happening.
Yeah, so we recognize, like Emily said, that a lot of students are want to do rotations, co-ops, internships, and they have nowhere to stay, and they're being charged outrageous amount of prices for hotel stays. Airbnb is not it's too expensive for them, and a lot of times to rent an apartment you have to at least have a 6 month lease, whereas some students may be going to the interview for an internship or a co-op, or maybe just doing a 6 month co-op. So our idea is called Connect and Stay, where students get an opportunity to connect with alumni, and the alumni would host them at their home for under the terms and conditions of the alumni's purposes, but they would host them in their home, and they'll get an opportunity to connect with that alumni and make a terms and conditions that they may want to stay for 5 days up to 6 months and no longer than 6 months because it is short-term stay.
I think it's a really interesting idea. I know a lot of other students have had that same problem of where do we stay, or like if you get month to month housing, it's just super expensive.
I mentioned that last year there was a similar thing for like internships, people looking for short-term like rentals, but like the alumni connection aspect of it is, I think, makes it a little bit different.
Well, you remember Charlie last year, our previous graduate student, he was like when he did a summer internship, he was basically paying for two apartments because
Hmm.
right, you're paying for the year lease for your West Lafayette one, and then he moved to Indy for his internship and had to get another apartment there. And so actually, it's a really interesting idea.
And this way, alumni, there's more ways for alumni to give back because not every alumni hits it big and makes a lot of money and can send a check to the university. And some alumni do want to give back and help, but they don't have a way to give back and help. This allows them to, if they aren't, if they haven't hit it big and they're alumni who's maybe struggling to pay back some student debt, to host a student at a low rate, and if they have hit it big, maybe host a student for free, just to give back. So it's other ways of alumni to give back. To
I like it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so has anybody else made any pivots that they want to talk about, even if you've, completely changed your idea from one thing to another? Anybody else want to share anything, get some feedback? So does anybody have any questions about revenue streams, cost structures, anything that we covered in the last workshop? Has anybody figured out what their revenue model is? What about Zachary? You wanna talk about what your revenue model is?
Yeah, so we kind of go with two aspects. We want to do direct sales to not only people that just find either our website or find our product on uh, Amazon, because we do plan on having Amazon as a main partner, hopefully in the future. But we also look forward to possibly in the start doing wholesales to hospice care facilities or other uh, rehab facilities that would be able to benefit from using our product in bulk buys. So they get a benefit from the cost reduction and are also able to distribute it to all their patients instead of just doing direct sales for them individually, but kind of just doing the wholesale as the main part at the initial and then slowly go towards the direct sales while maintaining those contracts of wholesales.
I'm not sure if either Arnold or I have asked about this before, but have you considered, like if this could be something covered by insurance?
Uh, we've we've talked to some people that have developed some med tech devices, and they are like have a certain level of med tech, like they're med tech level 1, 2, or 3, I believe. Ours is so low tech and doesn't really prove such a necessity that it would be kind of hard to get an insurance company to pay for it.
Okay.
But hopefully, with how cheap our product will be, we're hoping it won't be much of an issue.
Okay. Arnold, you look like you're thinking. Did you want to add to that?
No, I was just thinking that it seems like it's not so much the technology behind the device, but just it seems like there would be a code that I'm not an expert, but it seems like there would be a code for a reimbursement code that would be available.
Yeah, it hasn't really been much of a question for us in trying to like a strategy to get insurance to pay for it. But we could definitely and probably should look more into it. It's just that we never really we all from what we've seen from other people that have done startups or try to get insurance to pay for it, it's all like these extremely expensive devices or extremely essential in the sense of uh, they need it, like whether it's medicine or whether it's a uh, wheelchair. Ours is an adaptive eating device that's people can most could possibly live without, which is kind of what we have been told would be a problem in getting it to be reimbursed.
Yeah. Plus, like you
Kind of
said,
like getting caps on your teeth or like something cosmetic, something like that. I think that's how someone, I don't remember his name, but that's how they put it. But there's probably some loopholes that we have not found yet.
no, it's a tough balance because if the item is relatively inexpensive, then like the whole process of getting an insurance claim for a $10 thing might not be worth someone's time initially.
Right.
Okay.
Anybody else want to share anything about revenue streams or cost structure specifically? Any questions you have? All right. Does anybody have questions about like anything else right now related to the competition, the material, anything? I will take this silence as a no. Okay, so I just wanted to talk about something that has come up. I've had several office hour sessions and even kind of in the workshops a little bit, it's come up. So I've gotten some questions like, how do I interview customers without telling them all the features of my thing, or having them get concerned about how much it's going to cost, or that they're hearing a lot of things in the interviews that like basically aren't what I wanted to hear. It's not validating my assumptions. So I just wanted to talk about how it's important to remember the reason why you're doing the interviews, and just kind of reiterate a few things from the talking to customers workshop, which was like way back at the beginning of like the fall semester. So you're conducting the interviews to find out or prove that there is a problem that a customer is having, a certain customer is having while completing a job they're trying to do in their work or personal life. So you're really trying to get them to answer questions that are really defining exactly what that problem is, like how big of a problem it is, and being able to prove that your solution solves that problem better than existing solutions. So you want to find out if the customer is willing to pay for a solution to the problem. You're not trying to sell or push your solution onto someone. So what you don't want to think of it as is a sales pitch. You might talk to the same customer later when you're trying to sign them on to what you're doing or get them as a customer, but right now you're really just trying to listen. And what you want to get out of the interview is information, not necessarily a sale, like right then. Um, and so it's easy to get frustrated when you aren't hearing what you want to hear. But remember way back, I told you that you should be excited about like hearing things that you don't want to hear. So if your customers aren't seeing the value in what you're offering, or you find out they're not really having the problem that you thought they were, like this is good information to have. It's good that you're finding this out. You shouldn't, kind of get stuck on your solution and keep trying to probe them about specific features when, you've invalidated your assumption that this is a problem that they're having, but they might have a problem that you can solve, and it might be a bigger problem that they might be willing to pay more money to solve, like with the parking app. Maybe you find out that the tailgating thing, they want to be able to have people tailgate, and maybe that's a bigger problem for them that they would be willing to pay more money to solve. So like it's great that you got that insight out of doing that interview because you can do something with that information. So it's important to really be listening to something, even if it's something you don't necessarily think that you want to hear, because all of those bits of information are good things and they can help guide you in different directions if you need to go in a direction. So like I said, you could find out that somebody's having a bigger problem. Maybe you're not with the right customer. Maybe you're solving a problem, but you're talking to the wrong people. They're not the ones having that problem in a big enough way that they will pay money to solve it. So Arnold talked in a previous workshop about Presso. So that was the one where it's like dry cleaning. He has these machines that he could put in. He was originally thinking put into, airports where people are commuting, traveling, and, want to quickly do their dry cleaning. And then he ended up finding out that the customer segment that was really having a problem was the movie industry and needing to clean costumes in between, takes of a movie. And so he had to pivot, to a different customer, but it ended up probably, I would assume, being more of a lucrative, profitable operation for him. So finding out these little pieces of information can actually lead to something bigger and better for you. So don't get kind of frustrated or stuck on the fact that people just aren't seeing value in what you're doing. So I just wanted to kind of go over that a little bit. Does anybody have any questions about that? And just to remind you, I do have office hours, like I said, and if you're stuck on like what specific questions should I be asking, people in these interviews, like how do I get them to give me this information I'm looking for without pushing them in a certain way, like feel free to hop on an office hours with me and we can kind of craft the exact questions that you can ask in those interviews. All right. So now we can talk about judging criteria. I hope you guys can see this. It's a lot of words in one graphic. So like I said, this is the criteria that we're using with our judges for the semifinal submissions, but it's important that you know it now and that you keep this in mind when you're doing all of the rounds. So round one, you need to be thinking about your customer discovery process for sure in that video, but then being ready for round two, those feedback sessions with the judges, they'll also be looking to see that your pitch is demonstrating kind of all of these criteria. So it's a scale from 1 to 5 based on these specific qualities here. So 1 is very weak, 5 is very good. I won't go through and read each one of the lines individually to you. I will point out the customer discovery process. So I've asked in probably every workshop since November how many customer interviews you've been doing, and I've been promoting this idea of like do 100 interviews or so. So what we mean by quality interviews, it's you're not doing just surveys. You've actually spoken to a customer, had a conversation, and then you've used the information, those insights from the customer interviews to validate or invalidate hypotheses or assumptions that you have. So basically that means you need to be able to show when you're pitching, when you're recording your, pitch for the semifinals, that you've interviewed people and you have quality interviews and you've used that information to take your business model canvas from the initial to what it is now. You should have a few iterations of it. Your boxes should have changed, and you should be using, the terminology in your pitch that says something, like we talked to 50 customers and they said they had this problem which validated this assumption. We talked to this many customers and they said, and they invalidated this, so we made a pivot. So you want to be using those kinds of words to show the judges that you understand the point of the customer discovery process. And then because you've done that, that will also help you with many of the other areas on here. So like value prop, customer segments, a lot of that depends on what you got out of the customer discovery process. So I know there's a lot of words on here, but does anybody have any questions about any of the criteria or how the judging is going to work?
I have a question. So we need to be able to prove and show or relay it in the video, all of these different aspects here to the left or in the gold.
Yes.
So, okay. So, the business model canvas competition, is that something where it's like we need to somehow show the model, the business model? Like, what are we being, is it coming, does the competition come down to the actual model and the idea of the model, or just the quality of how you hit the specifications on this video?
I think it's a combination of having a solid business model, proving that you have, product market fit. There is a problem, you have a solution, and your solution is better than existing solutions, but it's also a lot about how you're presenting it, how you're able to describe your value proposition. And also the judges will be able to ask you questions. So how you're able to answer those questions. So they might ask things like, what do your customers say about that? And you want to be able to pull out specifically what a customer has said about that. So they want to know that your customers and you know the problem that they're having and how you're solving it.
Okay.
So looking at this criteria, everything's ranked, but it's not necessarily like a scoring system. Like you get a certain number of points for having a certain number of interviews. It's more like a judge is going to look at it, and based on their kind of opinion and this criteria, they'll rate whether your video quality was very good or if they thought it was weak. And a lot of judges will have very differing opinions about what very good means to them. So this is kind of what we've put together. The judges will see this and know what we're expecting out of your presentations. But at the end of the day, you know, their feedback is going to be slightly different than like what ours would be, for example.
Thank you.
Okay, Emily, I had a couple of questions. First is that, I mean, is there like a bias towards like the journey that you've made overall through like customer discovery? Because what I get out of is like quality interviews where like, is there like judging of quality of those interviews, and like, is there a bias induction in themselves? And like, is there a measure of progress more than like if everyone is affirming the hypothesis?
I think there's not a bias towards like the process, because there's no weighting or anything. All of the criteria is equal. So it's just as important that you have, your good customer discovery process that you can show that you've learned those insights from, but viability is just as important. Like it needs to be a good idea that's actually going to work.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, like, could you tell us like what is the best way to document these? Because these are like written on Notion or something, and like, these are insights. I mean, is there a way to present customer interviews in a better light than we can?
I think you want to have the number of people that you've talked to. Like you want to know that number, and you want to know, how many of them said, if you're going to, present something in your pitch, you want to have the data from your customer interviews to back it up. So if you state something, a judge might ask, after your pitch is over, did you talk to your customers? Did they say that? And you can say, yeah, 28 people out of the 40 that we interviewed said, yes, this is a problem for them.
Okay.
And I think I'll also add that a good way to frame it, both from your and Lorraine's question, is if you show your business model canvas, the best way is to show how it evolves, how it's evolved over the course of the competition. So you can come through and say, okay, here's my initial business model canvas, and I had, if you imagine every box, I had 12 assumptions. Let's start with our, value proposition. We thought that this was a problem. I interviewed 20 people, and they said they agreed that they had this problem. So then it's like, okay, that was validated. I thought that my customer segment was going to be college kids, living in a rural environment. I interviewed them. They actually didn't have that problem. So that invalidates, so it turns red. But from those interviews, it turned out it was actually college kids living in urban environments where that was a match. And we thought that they wanted to pay monthly, but after talking to everyone, nobody wants to pay monthly. They want to do it free, so that invalidated that. So you just kind of go through as you're making progress, and this is why you need a large quantity, because one person isn't going to be able to tell you everything about every box.
Yeah.
But as they're going through, you'll say, well, I'm really interested in finding out more about this segment, this box, and so I'd like to talk to you about this. And then after you validate or invalidate, you're going to kind of move on to a next box, and then you're going to talk to other people. So it's sort of, for the engineers out there, it's a very scientific method in the sense of, hey, I have an assumption, I'm going to go collect data. It's going to be positive or negative. You write it down, and then move on to the next one. And so it is an iterative process, because you'll learn something that, hey, I had this problem, they agreed, but it was for a different customer segment, or they didn't have this problem, but maybe they had a different problem. So they're all intertwined. And so you'll find that a lot of times it may seem like you're going in circles, but you actually are, because you're iterating. So when you change one aspect of something, it's going to affect another aspect. And so they're all kind of intertwined. So you'll find that as it's evolving, you're going to keep going in circles. And that's why you got to keep talking to customers. And eventually, like you're peeling an onion, you hopefully get something that everything is consistent and works.
Yeah.
And then you know you've
Thank
got
you.
something good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I might share this video again. In one of the earlier workshops, I shared the Owlet IBMC video, which was a good example of like what, you know, a good pitch in a business model competition looks like. And something that they did is they brought their business model canvas up on the screen, and they would, I believe they would like highlight it in different colors and show, you know, this box, you know, it was invalidated by these customer interviews, and then show what they changed it to, and kind of like showed it kind of live changing on the canvas throughout their pitch, which helps the judges to see how things changed over the different iterations. Any other questions about any of the criteria?
What does LTV CAC stand for?
So that's actually what we're learning about in the next workshop in 2 weeks. So that's lifetime value of the customer and customer acquisition costs. So that will be going more into in the next workshop. So you should get that after. And then the channels marketing is what we're going to get into after this, so shortly. So most of this, except for the channels and the LTV and CAC, we've already gone through. So you should have a good grasp, or you should be to the point of grasping, you know, your value proposition and your customer segments at this point.
Is there a factor on the score when involving time? Is if it goes over too long, like what's a sweet spot you would recommend for us?
I would say, like, for the semifinals, since you're submitting a 10-minute recorded pitch, if it's over by like a few seconds or something, that's not a big deal. I would keep it like under 11 minutes. But just cutting you off at that 10 minutes, because you will have the opportunity live, like on April 14th, for judges to be coming around and asking questions. So you'll get a little bit more time to explain things when the judges come around and actually talk to you. But yeah, try to keep the video as close to 10 minutes as you can.
So you said the judges will actually come around and talk to us on April 14th. What does that day look like?
Yeah, so we'll go a little more into detail, not next workshop, but workshop after. But in the morning of April 14th, so the time frame we're thinking right now is like 10 a.m. to noon. We're using a program called Philo, which is going to simulate a showcase experience where each of your teams will have a booth. So you'll have your business model canvas, like an initial and a current one, posted in the room, as well as your executive summary. And then the judges will have already viewed your videos. You'll submit those the Friday before, and they'll be reviewing them over the few days before the 14th. And then they'll come into the platform and be able to find you in your virtual booth and see, you know, your canvas as you have it posted, and be able to ask you more clarifying questions. And then they can go into the system and update any of their scores. So it's likely that before a judge talks to you, he's already put like a preliminary score into the system, and he or she's just asking kind of clarifying questions and they might change their score slightly, but they're really just walking around virtually to ask any kind of lingering questions that they had after watching your video.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, we'll give you guys more information as we get closer. The virtual space hasn't necessarily been built yet, but we'll give you instructions on how you'll need to upload everything in there, and we'll try to have some sort of like dress rehearsal, like testing it out to make sure you know what you're in for on the day and you're ready for the judges. All right, any more questions on the criteria before I move on to talking about channels? And again, I have office hours, so if you have any questions later and you want to talk about any of these criteria, I am available. All right. So like I said, we're going to talk about our go-to-market strategy or channels, which is how you're going to reach customers. How are you going to make people aware of what it is that you're offering? How are they going to buy it? That sort of thing. So this will help you define, there's a channels box on the business model canvas. So after tonight, you should be able to fill that out a little bit more clearly. So before we get into talking about channels specifically, it's important that we defined customer roles. Some people call them types that you will interact with or will have an impact on whether or not someone buys your thing. So an end user is a person who actually uses the product. So if it's a toy or something, a child might be the end user of the product. If it's maybe a software solution for a corporation, an employee might be the end user, and that's the person trying to complete a job that you are providing a solution for. That person may be the same as the decision maker, but a lot of times it's different. So with the child toy example, the parent might be the decision maker as well as the payer, the person who actually pays for it. In the case of the employee at a corporation, the decision maker might be their manager who decides, what is going to be paid for out of department budget. So then the payer is the person, who pays. That could be the same as the decision maker in other systems, like the Purdue system. The business office might be the payer, and they're not the same as the decision maker. An influencer is somebody who weighs in on the solution purchase, like a thought leader or maybe a professional org. So maybe there's somebody within an organization that they're the technology expert and they're the ones who weigh in and say whether something should be purchased. A saboteur is basically the opposite of that. So there are somebody who will actively try to stop the purchase of your solution. So that's somebody like they would lose out if the solution is adopted. So these are a number of different roles that someone might have. We'll go through an example where I'll give you a product and you are going to tell me who fits into each of these roles with that product. So that product is a Nintendo Switch. So anybody feel free to unmute and shout out who you think the end user of a Nintendo Switch is.
Gamers?
Or a kid.
Yeah, kid might be one. Yeah, I would say the Nintendo Switch is geared probably more towards kids. I'm not sure what the exact age demographic is, but okay, so the end user is a kid who's a gamer. Who would be the decision maker in this scenario?
Maybe a parent.
All right. And do you think that the parent's also the payer in the situation, or do you think the kid is the payer?
The parent. That's the payer.
All right. Who might be an influencer?
YouTubers or public figures.
Right. Yeah, there's some like YouTubers that review kids' toys and they might recommend it to the kid who then has to tell their mom who actually makes the decision and pays for the Switch. So can you think of anybody who might be a saboteur in this situation? I know that I had one of these in my house growing up.
If you have a sibling.
Yep. Maybe the sibling wants an Xbox and the parents are saying you can only get one. And so they're going to do everything they can to make sure that the Switch is not purchased so that they get their Xbox. All right. So does anybody have any questions about kind of who the end user is versus the decision maker and the payer after we've gone through this example here?
Could the what was the last one? The what was
The
the last one?
saboteur?
The saboteur and the um influencer. Those two, could those be when you take the context of YouTube, could those be like influencer could also be a saboteur because they could be doing a review on another system similar, but pretty much throwing shade at the games,
Yeah,
that
so a YouTuber could definitely be a saboteur also. Like I can think of like, you know, in the beauty community on YouTube, if a certain YouTuber has their own makeup brand and another YouTuber has their own makeup brand, they're very likely to give a bad review and tell people that there's something wrong with the product of the other person. So the same person who could be an influencer in another situation could be the saboteur in a different one.
Yeah.
And then recommender, I didn't talk about, this sometimes happens. It might be, so this is a person who's like formally asked to recommend solutions. So like a company might employ a third party like tech consultant who recommends to them a certain database or something that they should buy. So that might not apply in all situations, but it is another one of the customer roles or types. So I know we've had some conversations in these workshops about the end user versus the actual paying customer. So thinking about all of these different roles that come into play, what are some reasons you can think of that a customer or the end user might love your solution, think it's an awesome thing, but it doesn't get purchased?
if it's not affordable.
Because someone in one of the other roles decided it wasn't affordable, maybe. Anybody else have a thought? Yeah, so for example, with the Switch thing, so the child, might see a commercial for it and they see the benefit of having a Switch. They can play games wherever they want, but you actually need to be convincing this decision maker, who's the parent who has the authority, and the payer, who's also the parent who has the money, of the value of the Switch. So it's not enough to convince the kid that he needs the Switch. That's probably a lot easier to do. You have to convince the parent that there's a value in it for them to buy the Switch. And maybe that value is that they can give their kid the Switch and they'll be quiet while they're on a meeting or something like that. So this means you need to think of different messaging for each of those audience. Yeah, you want to get the kid excited about having this toy, but it's not going to do much to actually sell it if you're not convincing the parent that it's a good idea to buy. Like the kid might be a good influencer to try to tell the parent that they should have it and what the benefits are, but you need to be, crafting different messages for each of the different roles that you have to convince. So another thing to think about is if you're selling to companies like a corporation, they have, their budget or purchasing cycles too. So for example, a company might only purchase new software every few years, but you have this great solution that fits. Or with a software solution, sometimes there's contracts involved. So you might talk to them about this great solution that you have to solve a problem they're having, but they're locked in to a 3-5 year contract that they can't get out of. So these are all things that you need to be considering, that just because you have this great thing doesn't mean that somebody's just going to buy it. And so there's whole systems set up, especially the larger the company that you're working with, they might have purchasing cycles that you're just outside of.
I mean, yeah, I can think of two really good examples about this. So one was actually here on Purdue's campus a few years ago for the bike sharing. They had there was a company called Zagster, and Purdue had signed an exclusive license with Zagster saying that, hey, we're going to be the only bike sharing company on Purdue's campus for 3 years. And so then when all these other Spin, VORide, all these other companies came up, they're like, oh, we love your product. This would be great for students, but we have this one contract that we can't get out of. So come back to us in a year and a half. And then another one was there was a Purdue startup that was doing software for companies, and they had gone to the engineers, and the engineers loved it, the managers loved it. They said, this is great, we totally want to implement it. And then as a saboteur, the IT department came through and said, no. And they said, well, what's going on? It's like, well, we just spent $10 million and we bought SAP. And so we're in the process of a 3-year integration. And as a blanket, we're not buying any more software right now. And so it's a situation where the end users and everybody loved it, but for certain reasons that were outside of their control, the company's just not able to purchase it. And so you'll get these types of insights if you're doing, I'll say, really good quality interviews. And you can, as you're interviewing customers, you can understand when you're talking to them which role they might have in their company's ecosystem, which role they have. And it's also easy to start asking them other questions about, well, who else should I talk to? Can you tell me about how just the purchasing process works in your company? Who needs to approve? You know, who else, who are the influencers, things like that. You can get a lot of insight on how things work.
Does anybody have any questions about any of that? I will move on. All right, so now we're going to talk about channels. Does anybody have any idea what channels are? What I'm talking about? I'll pick on somebody. Nancy, what do you think?
In terms of what? Like, could you reiterate a little bit more?
Yeah, so in terms of go-to-market, how you're going to reach your customers, how would
Oh,
you describe a channel?
so I'd say social media, maybe.
So that could be a channel, so a type of channel. So I'll just go through here. So channels serve 5 major functions. So the first is raising awareness. So this would be through advertising, marketing campaigns. So social media might fit into that, of using that to raise awareness. The second function is that they help customers evaluate what your value prop is. So it helps them understand what problem you are solving for them, what benefit they're going to get out of it. They also allow your customers to purchase. So a sales channel, how are they actually going to get the thing that you are offering? The fourth is delivering the value prop. So how are you actually going to get the product to them after they buy it? And then the fifth function is providing post-purchase support. So that would be having a customer call service center. So if they have any problems with it or anything, they have somewhere to call someone to connect with about it. So those are the 5 major functions of channels. So on the right there, you'll see what is referred to as the classic marketing funnel. So it starts with awareness, goes to interest, consideration, and then finally a purchase. And then the viral loop means that you've made a purchase and then you go and you tell other people about it, which makes them aware of it and kind of starts their own funnel, which kind of ends up being free marketing for the company because they've got you as a customer. They may have paid for you, but then you for free went and told somebody about it. So every time I eat at a great restaurant for the first time, I tell like 5 to 10 people about it every single time. So maybe they paid for me to click on an ad or something, but then I turned around and told 5 to 10 other people about it. So here are some ways that you can pay for awareness. So public relations, advertising, trade shows, if that applies to what you're doing. You can do webinars, email marketing, SEO, and business development. So those are ways that you can pay for that awareness to start the funnel. And then here are free awareness. So getting publications and journals talking about the technology that you're working on, going and speaking at conferences, writing papers, doing educational seminars, word of mouth, like I was talking about. I tell 5 to 10 people about everything that I think is cool, and a lot of people do that as well. You can blog and also social media. Like we said, that's a great way of getting awareness. So I want you to tell me about a brand that you're a customer of. So tell me about something that you bought, I would say in the last couple of weeks. How did you find out about it? What made you decide to purchase it? How did you purchase it? And did you tell anybody else about it after you bought it? So anybody want to share before I just call on somebody to think of something you bought in the last 2 weeks? Because I'll do it.
I have a small example for that.
Awesome. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's a really cliched example. It's a credit card. Say I bought a credit card a few weeks back, and that was because they were giving me some kind of discount if I spend $500 or more. And the way I bought it was through the website. It got delivered to me, and the way I recommended my friends was that I got a referral of $100 when I used to refer my friends for the same credit card using my referral link. So I guess that's paid awareness, but that is how the loop was covered, closed.
So how did you become aware of it in the first place? Like, did you get an
Oh,
email with that offer? Did you just see it on a website? How did you come across it?
yeah. So yeah, I saw it on the website. So I
All
was
right.
buying a phone and I saw the offer on the website, and that is how I got into it.
Right.
Yep.
So you can see kind of how you became aware of it by, seeing it on the website. You got interested in it because of the offer that they made, basically. You considered it and then you purchased it. And then if you tell other people about it, you get something back for that and they get another customer. And it probably, I'm assuming, because they give you like $100 referral, that it would probably, their customer acquisition cost of getting another person must be higher than $100, or else they probably wouldn't be willing to
Right.
to give you that much to do it for them.
Very true. Yep. Got it.
Cool. Anybody else have an example of anything they bought over the last couple weeks? So I can give you an example of something I bought and what happened. So it was Valentine's Day last weekend. I had no idea what I was going to get my husband. I completely forgot about it until like a couple of days before. But so I just started going through my email because I know I get constant emails from everybody, and especially around a holiday. They know that I'm married. It's in some database of my information somewhere. So they're like, she's going to need to buy something. And so I got all of these emails, and Garrett Popcorn out of Chicago, if anybody's aware of them, it's the best popcorn on the planet. And they send me an email, I would say probably every day, if not more than once a day. And it works because every few months I'm like, oh man, I've been seeing this every day. Now I'm going to buy it. So I had seen for months these emails coming in, and finally they had a subject line about 20% off special, love themed tens. So then I open up the email, I see the coupon code. So they made me aware of it. I was interested in it because I got 20% off, and they had cute little, heart tens. So then I get on the website, I'm considering all of my options on there, and then I eventually purchased it. And then, like I said, I tell everybody about everything that I do. So I've probably told at least 5 people that I bought Garrett's popcorn since then for my husband. And now it's likely maybe at least one of those people will be like, oh man, I really like popcorn. I should try out this Garrett's. And they're now aware of it, and they're getting interest in it and going back down the funnel. So it's kind of my example of how I went from awareness to purchase, and then possibly convince somebody else to purchase it, or at least be aware that Garrett's exists, which is important that people know. All right. Any questions about that before we move on? All right. So these are questions that you should be asking yourself to figure out what your channels should be. So if you look at the business model canvas, these are the questions that are kind of listed in that box there. So this will help you if you're thinking about these things when you're doing your customer interviews. These are a couple of these things are things you can find out from your customers themselves. So through which channels do our customers want to be reached? So from your customer interviews, what channels have you identified that the customers would like to be reached through? So you need to find out how they're currently receiving information, how they prefer to receive it. So is it through TV ads, online advertisements, magazines or newspapers? Do they attend trade shows to get their information? And then you want to find out more information about each one of those. If they're reading magazines, specifically what magazines are they reading? What trade shows are they attending? What websites do they go on? So you need to be finding them where they are and putting information about what your solution is in front of them, so they don't have to be actively going out and finding this information on their own. You're going to where they're already getting their information. So you're integrating it with their normal routine of getting information, and specifically where they get information about the type of products that you're offering. So if you already have any channels in place, you want to figure out what's working best for you. So there needs to be a good return on investment. So for example, it might cost you $10,000 to attend a trade show and get a booth to help raise awareness for your product. So if you only get a few good leads out of that, and it leads to $5,000 in sales, then that wasn't the most cost-effective way of going about getting customers. However, if you pay $10,000 to attend this trade show and that turns into $50,000 in sales, then you can definitely justify the cost of spending $10,000 to go to the trade show.
And I'll also just add that this is another great opportunity when you're interviewing to ask questions about, so, like Emily said, where do you think you would go to find out information about new products like this? And they'll already basically give you a sense of, well, this is my customer, and they would find out about this. So now you kind of already know a way to reach them.
Right. And like I said, you want to make sure it's integrated with their routine. You want to make it as easy as possible for them to find out about your thing, to purchase it, to receive it, and then to contact you after the purchase if there's a problem. So you want to be thinking about all your different channels. Like we talked about previously in the last workshop, how do people want to pay for it? You want to make every step along the way of getting your thing easy for them and integrated with what they're already doing, so they don't have to go out of their way to find out about it, to buy it, to get it, and to be able to contact you. Any questions about that? All right. So we're already to the homework section. So the homework is just, like I said, after going through all that, you should be able to define your channels a little bit more. So be thinking about when you have talked to customers or continue to do more customer interviews to figure out what those channels are that your customers are already going to find information about what it is that you're working on to buy that. Understand all those 5 functions of a channel and how you're going to do each one of those to make your go-to-market strategy. You also want to be thinking about all of those customer roles that we defined and how you would have to craft messages and find those people differently. So Lola just shared the homework assignment in the chat, which is just a simple Word document to fill out your customer roles, like the end user, the decision maker, the payer. For some of you, the end user, the decision maker, and payer may all be the same person, but for other teams, they may all be 3 different people. So list all those out, and then I believe at the bottom, it's asking about what channels you'll use to reach those people, and talk about your go-to-market strategy in more detail. So if you want to fill that out and send it into the BMC email, we can kind of review those and see if we see any kind of glaring problems and what your go-to-market strategy would be. And we can check in at the next workshop and talk about all of that feedback.
So, quick question. So, I feel like we can kind of guess what would be the right channel to do. But for example, like with the parking app, maybe if you got your first spot for free, that might be a good incentive for people to use it. But that's also a very expensive, like, I guess, option rather than like trying to advertise maybe through social media and things. So I guess it quite like we wouldn't be able to quantify, right? Like which one works better. So how do we say we would use one over the other?
So in the next workshop, we'll talk a lot more about customer acquisition costs and what kind of each one of those methods of acquiring a customer for the first time are. So we'll have a worksheet that will help you kind of determine that customer acquisition costs based on different methods. So I think that will help you figure it out a little bit more. Arnold, do you have anything else until then?
The only other thing I was going to say was if you're interviewing, because for you, you have 2 different segments. You have people who have parking spots and you have people who are looking for parking spots. And they probably would find out potentially about your app through different ways. And so it really comes down to, as you're interviewing them, just asking the question I mentioned earlier. So how would you expect to find out about an app like this? And that'll give you your best lead. I mean, you won't know until you actually do it, but at least if the customers, you have some data that says, oh, well, I asked, 20 sports fans, and they said, oh, we expected to hear from, Purdue as part of the where to park, or things like that, where you can get a good sense of where it goes. Or people may just say, oh, maybe social media, following the Purdue athletics, things like that.
Gotcha.
Anybody else have any questions about anything that we talked about, or just in general, any questions, even if it's about the criteria, anything about the competition, any questions at all that we can answer for you?
Namely, I thought of another example about the reasons why companies won't buy from you.
Yeah.
So when I was working at out in California at a company, a startup company called Infinera, we were making telecom chips. And so even after the company was pretty big, so we were in the realistically, $50 million revenue or whatnot. One of the things that as a telecom company we were trying to do was win one of the big three. So we were trying to win AT&T, we were trying to win Sprint, we were trying to win T-Mobile, etc. But we could never get a contract with them. And finally, one of the salespeople met with AT&T, and AT&T said, "Well, we love your product. It really solves all our problems. There are a few snags that we have. Number one is, as a corporate rule, when we buy from any company, we are not allowed to be more than 1/3 of your revenue. And number two, if we're going to buy this type of equipment, we want to buy $100 million worth. We're not going to buy $1 million worth. Like if we're going to do an implementation, it's going to be $100 million." And so with those two pieces of info, all of a sudden it became completely intractable. Like, okay, they want to buy $100 million. They can't be more than 1/3 of our revenue. That means we have to be a $300 million company before we can win AT&T. It became very clear. It's like, oh, there's just no way. And a lot of the big companies were like that. And you can imagine a lot of bigger corporations may have rules of, we don't buy from startups, or we don't buy from companies that are less than a year old, or don't have revenue or aren't profitable. And so again, it could be something where you have a great product, but some weird corporate rule prevents them from buying from you.
Why do you think they came up with that rule?
Oh, it's because, like for AT&T, it was because it's too big of a risk if they're that large of a customer. So it just goes to the risk management of, okay, if they're less than 1/3, I don't know how they came with the third, but if they're less than 1/3, then the company will survive whether we buy equipment from you or not. Right? If we have an up and down, then we know you're stable. But if we're 90% of your business, then we might as well just acquire you.
Yeah, true.
Then try to buy, because like you may not be around. You're not, if anything happens and we delay an order or whatnot, then you're gonna go out of business.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Hi, Emily. Would there be a timetable scheduling for the competition? I think I may have missed that.
No, to actually schedule
the deadlines, for each stage, just like a map, a pathway that shows the deadlines for each bridge to cross. Maybe if you could share that if it's there.
Yeah, in the last workshop, which I sent links out to in an email last week sometime, in that workshop I went kind of more in detail about what we're expecting in each of the rounds and when they're due. And also if you go to the Prowler page, there's a timeline on there when each thing is due.
Cool, thank you.
Yep. Okay, any other questions? If not, then our next workshop, like I said, it'll be March 3rd in 2 weeks, and we're going to go over customer acquisition costs. So how much do you have to spend to actually acquire each one of your customers? And then what is the lifetime value of each of those customers that you acquire? How much money can you make from them over the span of your relationship with that customer? So that will help you with one of the judging criteria that we showed earlier, which is the customer acquisition cost and lifetime value. All right. Like I said, feel free to email any questions to the BMC email, set up an office hours with me. I believe if you go to the Prowler page and our website, multiple different places, there's the link for the office hours. So I do those Thursday and Friday afternoons usually. All right. Everybody have a good night.
Thanks, Emily.
Yep. See ya.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Yeah.